2025 work session of the Riverton City Council to order at 7 p.m. Councilmember Pearson Lewis has agreed to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, after which Councilman Bailey will give us the invocation. If everyone could please rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our dearest Heavenly Father, thank you for the many blessings that we enjoy living here in this beautiful city of Riverton in the state of Wyoming. Please bless us all in all that we do as we go about making decisions for the city of Riverton and all of its residents. Please bless that we will take into account all the needs that are out there and do our best to help fulfill those needs. Please bless all of us as we make these decisions. Please bless our emergency responders, police, military, and all of those who go about their jobs every day protecting us and keep them safe. We ask you to please bless us all as we go home tonight, that we will be safe also. And we ask all these things in the name of thy beloved Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you very much, Councilman Bailey and Councilwoman Pearson Lewis. And thank you, everyone, for attending. City Administrator, well, actually, why don't we have the Administrative Services Director conduct the roll call?
Thank you, Your Honor. Councilmember Eric Carr.
Here.
Councilmember Rebecca Pearson Lewis.
Here.
Councilmember Mike Bailey.
Here.
Councilmember Carla Borders.
Absent.
Councilmember Kyle Larson.
Here.
Councilmember Karen Johnson.
Here.
Mayor Tim Hancock.
I'm here. I would entertain a motion to excuse Councilwoman Carla Borders from tonight's meeting.
So moved.
Second.
A motion by Councilman Larson, second by Councilwoman Johnson. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Motion passes. I declare a quorum. I'd entertain a motion for the approval of the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilman Larson, second by Councilman Bailey. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. I don't know if I can hear you or not, Councilman Carr. Have you been saying aye and I've been missing it?
It's real quiet. Yes, aye.
Okay, thank you. I vote aye. Motion passes. Fiscal year 2026 budget presentation and discussion. City Administrator.
Thank you, Your Honor. If you don't mind, I'll go to the podium.
Thank you, sir.
Your Honor, Council, and members of the public, we're glad to have you here tonight. It's my privilege to present to you the proposed fiscal year 2026 budget. And before I get into anything, I think it's appropriate that I take time to express my gratitude to each of you as elected officials for your participation as we've prepared this budget, and also for my team members. It's nice when you have people that work hard, that care about the community, and really truly are professionals in their field and are technically sound. And as a team, I thought we were able to work very well together this year and present a budget for you to consider. As we look at a few logistics for the fiscal year 26 budget, it's important to note that this is a presentation only, but you as a council have opportunity to work with staff up until the time of adoption to ensure that this budget represents your desires and your wishes as the governing body. We as staff are meant to support you as you are meant to support the people of Riverton. By statute, we are to distribute our proposed budget to you no later than May 15th. We were able to provide that to you just this last weekend, so you have a copy of the budget workbook. And the material or the information in that budget workbook will be the basis of what we're going to go through tonight for this presentation. Statute also states that we cannot adopt the budget, but I should say this better, that you as a governing body should hold a public hearing and adopt the budget no later than the third Tuesday of June. We're scheduled to have this for your consideration the second Tuesday of June, so that would be June 10th. With those items out of the way, I do want to also reiterate that there's no way for me in a timely manner to go through the entire City of Riverton budget in a presentation. Therefore, as you go through your budget workbooks and have questions, know that staff is available to answer those questions and also to receive your direction. Tonight, as we work through the budget, we'll address a few items. First and foremost, your council goals. We'll go through an overview of the entire fiscal year 26 budget, and then we'll speak specifically about the different funds associated with the budget, the general fund, the enterprise funds, our fiduciary funds, and then we'll close in talking about the capital improvements that are in this budget. There's nothing like tradition, and in every budget presentation I've been a part of, whether as a city administrator or as a staff member, it starts with a quote. Now, I can't say that I'm the most clever at finding these, but I do try to find the ones that are appropriate to my personality and also to the personality per se of the budget that's being proposed. So tonight, as you work through the budget and we discuss this, I want you to consider something that George Washington said, and he said, "We must consult our means rather than our wishes." That's truly what we've done this year. We're in a position where we need to focus on the core services that the City of Riverton and its residents need and deserve to receive, and that's what we really try to focus on. And when we do that, going to Roy Disney, decision-making is easy when you have your values clear. And then to quote his brother, who was just a little bit more popular than Roy, the way to get started is to quit talking and begin doing. That's how I feel. So this budget is important, but next year is where the rubber hits the road, and we're going to do everything we can to implement what you adopt as a governing body so that we can provide services to our great community. A few months ago, you had opportunity to consider goals for fiscal year 26. I won't go through each of these, but I do want to bring out a few highlights because this was a guiding document for us as staff, and we referenced it a few times over the several hours that we met together to prepare and discuss with you this proposed budget. There was a primary goal to improve communication and transparency. With that, our IT team has been working on a website facelift. This is through our host entity, Revise, and because we did a contract renewal with them, we'll have a free facelift is the best way that I can describe that for our website to make it look more current and more user-friendly. We're also investing in 2 modules, one that will improve the search engine on our website so that people can access the information they need through the website better, and also update a few of the modules that relate to the forms that are available on the website. I can tell you, as I sing the praises of my staff, and I hope to do that through the entirety of this presentation because they are so good, but this is from every level of the organization. We are proposing lean cost centers and lean organizations so that we are fiscally responsible and still keep the priority of providing services to the community in mind. That only works when we have the buy-in of all of our team members, and I can tell you that I appreciate so much our supervisors that were involved and engaged in the budget, our division managers, our department heads, our human resource generalists, because they truly operated with the appropriate goal of living within our means and providing service. $22,000 is proposed to provide a drinking fountain in City Park. That meets your goal for to facilitate the increased use of green spaces and parks by creating environments and that are improved and also facilities that are improved. The law enforcement arm of the city is also receiving several upgrades. One specifically is a capital improvement project that will upgrade the tasers, the body cameras, and other equipment that our officers use. And this was something that came about during our tours with you as a council, but our law enforcement officers communicated that they needed better equipment, and we're doing everything we can this current fiscal year and in the next fiscal year to meet their needs. This new program will provide opportunity to have upgraded tasers and body cam, but also improve the communication with AI for reports that are being prepared by our officers to save time, but also to protect them. So any time when a firearm or a taser is deployed, it automatically notifies those at City Hall and dispatch, and it's a great way to ensure that our officers are safe while they keep our community safe. There's $3 million in infrastructure projects that are being proposed and continually refined by the Fix Our Roads Citizen Committee. That was a goal that you had to ensure that we pay attention to our infrastructure, and we also receive communication from the Citizen Committee, but as we go through the next fiscal year, we'll ensure that community members also receive that communication. And this is probably the one that our team works very hard on and helps the situation that we're in from a fiscal standpoint. Of the proposed $36.7 million budget, 31% of that is going to be covered by grants that we're seeking. That's $11 million that will support the services that we're going to provide our community. We don't toot our horn well enough. The city of Riverton always goes after grants. We're very aggressive and we're very knowledgeable at seeking them out. And maybe because it's our personality to let our actions speak for ourselves instead of just talking for ourselves, but we should toot our horn more that we are a very strong agency when it comes to seeking, securing, and implementing grants for our community. As a general overview, the total proposed budget, as I mentioned, is just over $36.7 million. That's a slight decrease over fiscal year 25 that was proposed in the budget, which was a $36.9 million budget. Capital expenditures across all funds total $18.7 million. That's a 14% decrease over the current fiscal year. And you'll notice previous fiscal year budgeted capital improvements. I like to focus on that because when our community pays their taxes, they want to see improved services in their community. And making those investments to the infrastructure and then also the assets that we use to provide services is a great way to show value to our community, that the taxes they pay matter to improving their quality of life. You'll see this bar graph a few times through the presentation, and just a brief explanation, and I hope it's easy to see on the TV, but the dark blue line represents the proposed fiscal year 26 budget. The other lines are not representing actuals of the fiscal years that come before, but the budgets that were proposed for those fiscal years. So you'll notice that the overall budget proposed for fiscal year 26 and fiscal year 25 are pretty close to one another. You'll notice that yellow line for fiscal year 24 represented a significant increase, but a lot of that had to do with the capital improvement proposals that we were working on. So again, trying to spend money in the community so that people feel that impact and appreciate it. I mentioned that we followed the goals of the city council as we were preparing this budget, but we had a few other priorities. First and foremost, we wanted to take care of our employees. We cannot provide services without taking care of our employees that provide those services. Therefore, we were very sensitive to the fact that inflation and cost of living increases continue to impact our community, the economy, and our employees. We wanted to ensure that we retain our employees and take care of them so that we can keep them here for a long time. The Wyoming Cost of Living Index from Q4 of 2023 to Q4 of 2024, and that's the most recent cost of living index that we have available, illustrated a 4.6% increase. We took that to heart as we were proposing our budget, and we'll get into some of the items that we took or that we propose for you to consider as we get into it. But in brief, the 26 budget does propose a 4% cost of living adjustment for our non-exempt employees, a 2% adjustment for our exempt employees. Our exempt employees represent your senior staff members, and then also the police captain, the police lieutenant, the airport division manager, the operations division manager, and our city engineer. It also includes merit increases, which are represented in our 10-step scale. So as employees have opportunity to advance through that 10-step scale, we're proposing that that be budgeted for fiscal year 26. For our non-exempt employees, the average between each step in that 10-step scale is 2.5%. We have a strategy where we want to get our employees to the mean as fast as possible, or the average within that scale. So the early steps show just under a 4% increase, and then as you get later into the scale, as you get closer to step 9 or 8, 9, and 10, it's just under 2%. So an average, the step increase is 2.5, and it is less for your exempt employees, and that's at 1.75. And again, the priority was we want to live within our means and be very conscious to the market conditions that we're facing this current fiscal year and in the upcoming fiscal year. And I appreciate that our departments proposed appropriate lean line items with the goal of ensuring we take care of our employees first. We also are very conscious to the fact that we need to ensure that the City of Riverton is fiscally sound. The city's policy requires an 18.5% as a reserve requirement, and this budget meets that 18.5% requirement across all funds except the airport fund. We talked a little bit about the personnel impacts, and I like to show this. This is the last 10 years as it relates to the Wyoming Cost of Living Index. That's the bottom row in that table. And then also what the City of Riverton has tried to do to keep up with that inflation over the last 10 years. You'll notice that not every year could the city afford step increases or cost of living increases for the employees. That was never fun for the governing body or staff to propose, but it was responsible during those fiscal years to ensure that we were fiscally sound for our community. Again, we're fortunate to propose a 4% and a 2% cost of living increase in fiscal year 26 and step increases. And when we average that, and again, we're just using average numbers because the difference between the 10-step scale varies, but that's about 6.5% for our non-exempt employees, and those that are eligible for steps. Over the course of 10 years, steps and cost of living included, the city has been able to about keep up with the cost of living that's at 35% by offering 32.5% in those personnel adjustments. There will be an increase, as we talk about our employees, there will be an increase in our health insurance that's offered. But I'd like to point out that our insurance provider for health and dental, which is the Wyoming Educators Benefit Trust, did something out of the norm for the City of Riverton. As they communicated the tiers of percent increases for all of the members of their trust, they decided that they would offer a lower amount than the lowest tier for the City of Riverton, and that's because our stop-loss ratio has been very good. We've been long-standing partners with WebT, so instead of the minimum 4% increase that they're proposing, we are receiving a 2% increase for our health insurance, 0% for our dental as we move forward into the next fiscal year. We also talked about this last year. Senate Enrolled Act 50 of the 2024 legislative session increased the employee and the employer contribution for the law enforcement pension. This was to ensure that the pension is actuarially sound. It's great that you heard from the executive director of Wyoming Retirement Systems last week, so I will not try to explain further because I think he did a far more superior job than what I could do. But we're very sensitive as staff and as administration to the impact of these increases in health insurance on our employees, and also as it relates to the increase for retirement. The city opts to take a larger percentage than required of the employee contribution for pension for law enforcement and for our general employees. And we continue to do that with the increase that was passed last year by Enrolled Act 50. Our human resource generalist provided me with a couple scenarios, so we could at least elucidate a little bit of what the impact would be on our employees and contrast it with the cost of living increase and the steps that we're proposing. Please know that this is just a sample scenario. It does not reflect any one single employee. But if we were to take an equipment operator one and assume that they were eligible for a step increase, and also that their health insurance was the low deductible family plan, if this employee received a COLA of 4% in addition to a step increase, the employee's gross salary would increase by $3,325 a year, or about $277 a month. Their health insurance would increase by $210 per year, or $17.50 per month. With the increased cost in health insurance, this employee would still see an increase in their pay of approximately $259 a month. So the number that you compare the 4% COLA versus the number that you compare the 2% increase for health insurance is different. They're weighted differently. And even with the health insurance increase of 2%, this particular scenario, this employee would see $259 a month more in their paycheck. If we took a patrol officer who was at the intermediate level, and if this patrol officer was eligible for a step, if receiving a 4% COLA in addition to the step increase, the employee's gross salary would increase by $4,638.40 per year, or approximately $386 a month. Their health insurance with a low deductible family plan, and again, that's a variable we can't control, would increase by $210 per year, or $1,750 a month. The retirement deductions would increase by $675.02 per year, or approximately $57 a month. With the increased costs in health insurance and retirement, this employee would still see an increase of pay of approximately $312 per month. I like to point that out because it meets that goal that we have of taking care of our employees. It's very hard to hire employees right now, and it's very hard to retain employees, and we want to keep our good employees. Having gone through those priorities and talking a little bit about the personnel proposal that we have in this budget, we can now go fund by fund. And I should have referenced, please feel free to interrupt me at any time if you have questions. Your general fund budget is proposed at $11,156,300, which reflects 18.3% decrease from the current fiscal year 25. The majority of that is due to capital. Sales tax, as we go through some assumptions as far as our revenue, we are showing a proposed increase in sales tax that will be received of about $150,000, and that's sales tax only, not use tax. We're also showing a 200% increase in what we're projecting for the pari-mutuel betting. Basically the revenues that are generated from the off-site betting that we see at the Derby Club. This increase matches the current projection that we're on this fiscal year, and we believe is appropriate. I also want to point out that the police department are seeing a 46% increase in the grants that they seek to support just their operations, not the capital. So that's $77,000 that these grants will go towards supporting our law enforcement and victim witness efforts. When we go to revenue assumptions that are going in the other direction, it's been well publicized that the property tax will decrease for the city of Riverton. We're showing and reflecting a 20% decrease in the property tax that would be collected, or about $95,000. That's a conservative estimate, but we have been working with County Assessor Berg to ensure that we appropriately accounted for what was recently passed by the legislature and ensured that our budget was responsible in how it projected that. We're also going to see a significant decrease in the grant that we received with Fremont County School District 25 for the School Resource Officer Program. It's a 49% reduction, or $167,000. Part of the reason for this is a change in the agreement that we have with Fremont County School District 25, and I believe it's a fair agreement at this point. They will reimburse us for time that we spend at the schools and time that our officers spend on the street. That will not be included in the grant proposal. So there was a little bit of a shift in how that agreement was structured this last year. But then also, the school resource officer program was supported by 3 law enforcement officers, and it's going down to 2. And so that's why you see a reduction in the amount that's allowable to be drawn against that grant. We also show a decrease in the weed and pest contribution. That's a property tax-driven revenue source. We opt to receive those revenues rather than the weed and pest special district. And again, as it relates to recent legislative action, we're going to see about a $10,500 decrease just in that weed and pest operating line. I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about supplemental funding. In your budget, supplemental funding and direct distribution are interchangeable terms. What we're talking about is the legislatively approved direct distribution. What we're seeing in the proposed budget for next fiscal year is $2.1 million in that supplemental funding. This current fiscal year that we're in will receive $1.9 million in that revenue cost, in that revenue center, excuse me. I just lost my place, but I want to go through a little bit of the notes that I prepared for this. Supplemental funding or direct distribution is an allocation from the legislature, and typically it comes from over-the-cap mineral royalties. This allocation has been in place for several years, and it is an attempt by the state legislature to make whole local governments after some of the revenues or revenue opportunities for local governments were taken away years ago. When the recent budget was passed by the legislature, they did specifically state in House of Representative Enrolled Act 29, this was in the 2024 budget session, that the direct distribution or supplemental funding should be utilized to support our local governments, but it states it is the intent of the legislature that the funds distributed under this section of that bill, which was basically direct distribution, shall not be used for salary adjustments, additional personnel, or increased personnel benefits. As we look at what the city of Riverton has received in this direct distribution or supplemental funding historically, the average from fiscal year 10 to fiscal year 16 was $789,000. From fiscal year 17 to 23, the average was $1.3 million, just a little above. In the last 3 fiscal years, or fiscal year 24 through the proposed fiscal year 26, the average is just about $2 million. I bring this up because as we work to balance our budget, the expense that it takes to provide services to our community versus the revenues that our community generates in taxes, we rely heavily this proposed budget on supplemental funding. And that works. But we need to pay close attention if the legislature reduces the amount of direct distribution that it proposes in future fiscal years. The last thing we want to do as an entity is potentially rely too much on this source of revenue when we don't know what its long-term implication will be. I do not want to overinflate our operating budget if we can't count on covering that budget. As we look at the primary cost centers for operations in the general fund, and this is not all of the operating cost centers, but it's our primary operating and service providing cost centers. We have other expenses in the general fund, but as you look year over year in the general fund to provide services to the city of Riverton, it costs about $8.9 million. I want to contrast that against our sales tax, which we're projecting at $2.6 million, and that's our largest revenue source. We truly have to look for every revenue opportunity possible to ensure that we cover the operating liability, or maybe the operating opportunity for the city of Riverton to provide services. Fiscal year 25, that amount was just over $9 million. This does not include administrative allocations or some other centers. You'll notice that the largest cost center in the general fund relates to public safety. Our other cost centers that are related to our public works services include parks, streets, fleet maintenance. We have our administrative services provided in this cost center, and also our building and community improvement cost centers. As we look back at this bar graph that I've already explained, this is just specific to the general fund. And you'll notice that we are again proposing a smaller budget in the general fund for fiscal year 26 versus 25, but a lot of that has to do with capital expenditures. You'll also notice that that bar graph shows a little bit more in the operating budget than what we just talked about on the previous slide. The reason for that is the previous slide did not include the administrative allocation. It also didn't include the community service contract totals in the fiscal year and some other debt service cost centers. But that's a brief overview as you look over the last 5 years of the general fund operating center. Are there any questions about the general fund before we keep moving? All right, we'll keep plowing. I'd like to now talk about our enterprise funds. Wyoming statute explains that enterprise funds account for operations that are financed and operated in a manner similar to private business enterprise, where the intent of the governing body is that the costs and expenses, including depreciation, of providing goods or services to the general public on a continuing basis be financed or recovered primarily through user charges. That was a long way of saying our enterprise funds should be as self-sustaining as possible. There are also services that can be broken down into user fees. For the City of Riverton, our enterprise funds include the water fund, the wastewater fund, the sanitation fund, and the airport fund. It should be noted that the City of Riverton does treat Central Wyoming Regional Airport as a proprietary or enterprise fund. However, the International City County Management Association, or ICMA, explains that municipal airports often lie between proprietary and government funds or general funds, and may be defined more accurately as merit funds. This is because a municipal airport provides individual benefit that could be excluded to those unwilling to pay for them, yet also benefit the whole community by improving business opportunities and thereby helping to create jobs. So while we list the airport fund as an enterprise fund, it is not a self-sustaining fund and does receive contributions for its operations and capital from the general fund, thereby meeting that definition in ICMA of a merit fund. It's important to remember that any revenue or cash balances in the enterprise funds may only be used for the operation or capital needs of those specific funds. Enterprise funds cannot be commingled with each other or the general fund. It is possible to do an interfund loan, but it has to be accounted for with interest. It is, as just mentioned, possible for the general fund to support enterprise funds, but that's very rare and should only happen in the cases as explained with the merit fund or the airport fund. Otherwise, when folks pay their water bill, they should be confident that those fees are going towards the water system. When they pay their sanitation bill, that is not going to help buy a cop car, it's not going to help improve a park, or it's not even helping to improve the wastewater treatment plant. It's only going towards the sanitation fund operations. As we talk about the different enterprise funds, the water fund has an overall budget proposal of $4,599,270. This is a decrease of 7.8% over the current fiscal year. And remember, this is operations and capital. This is the total budget. The revenue assumptions do take into account the recently adopted rate changes by the governing body, and we're showing a 4% increase in what we title water receipts. That's an increase from 2.85 to 2.95. It should also be pointed out that the fiscal year 26 budget does account for grants received from the Wyoming Community Development Authority and also the State Loan and Investment Board. The capital budget is $1.8 million, which is slightly down from the current fiscal year. I'd also like to point out that in order to cover the capital needs of the water fund, the optional 1% excise tax will support improvements on the Spruce Street project specific to water lines to the tune of $200,000. There's also a $132,000 transfer from unobligated cash to support the capital budget that is proposed, and we'll get into that later. I'd also like to note that there is a operating fund balance. So from the revenues that are charged for operations versus the expenses to operate the system on a daily basis, there's a positive fund balance projected of just over $350,000. How are we going to use that money? We're going to immediately use it to invest into the infrastructure. So that $350,000 is accounted for in the upcoming capital budget. And that helps us so that we don't have to transfer more out of our unobligated cash, which is a dwindling account. As we compare the bar graphs, I'll just give you a chance to kind of look at that. I like digesting information in different ways, and this is a quick snapshot that shows how the total operating budget, capital budget, and overall budget interact over the last 5 years. Before we move on, are there any questions about the water fund? The wastewater fund proposes a total budget of $6.3 million. This is 6% under the current fiscal year 25. The assumption for revenue is about a 5% increase, $2.5 million to $2.625 million. And that, again, is incorporating the rate increases that you recently adopted. Similarly, there are SLIB and WCDA funds coming in to support our capital improvements. Similarly, the 1% fund is going to support sewer improvements for the Spruce Street project. And then also to cover the other capital needs in fiscal year 26, we are proposing to transfer $325,000 of unobligated cash within that enterprise fund and also utilize $354,000 of that operating fund balance. So again, similar to the water fund, the operating revenue versus the operating expenses will generate in operations a fund balance of about $354,000. That money goes immediately to support the capital obligations of the wastewater fund. Without that, we would be drawing more on cash to maintain the systems that we have. And there again is the comparison as you look over the last 5 fiscal years. Moving to the sanitation fund, the total overall budget is $2,731,825, which reflects, again, a decrease or 2% under what the current budget is, fiscal year 25. It does anticipate a 2% increase in revenues, and that is related back to the rate adjustments. It does show capital investments totaling $520,000 and a transfer of unobligated cash to meet the capital obligation of $161,000. It is also using that, I'm calling it an operating fund balance, and I'm only doing that because I like to separate operations with capital, but it's all part of the fiscal year 26 budget. But that operating fund balance of expense versus revenue will be utilized immediately to support the capital plan, capital budget for the sanitation fund to the tune of $358,000.
Mr. Butterfield, could you go back one slide to the wastewater fund? Well, back to where you had your bar graph. Can you tell me, that's a pretty big change, I guess, between 2 years ago, last year, this year? I mean, it looks like we've almost doubled in terms of our capital budget. Can you tell me a little bit about what's led to that?
Yeah, and I can only do so by highlighting the great work of our Public Works Department and our Administrative Services Director. We went hard after some of the grant opportunities that were made available through the bipartisan infrastructure law. I can't remember what IDJA stands for anymore. So either the bill or IDJA funds, we were very aggressive against those, and also the ARPA dollars that were available by the state of Wyoming. So what you're seeing is the significant investment into replacing our water meters throughout town. Those were budgeted to occur and then carried over into other fiscal years. And so most of this has to do with the improvements to the water meters in town, and then also some improvements at the wastewater treatment plant.
So, anybody wondering, I guess, if the city of Riverton gets grants, that's a good way to show it. And
The less adult side of me sometimes gets frustrated when a member of the community comes and tells me that they'd love to help me learn how to get grants. And I just want to say, I think we're pretty good, because we are. We just don't pat ourselves on the back, because we'd rather do the work than talk about the work. And as an entity, the city of Riverton is very aggressive in securing funds to support this community. So again, that's only when you see the less mature side of me. More mature side of me says, absolutely, would love to take any information you can give us.
Well, and I think even in terms of city staff that attended the recent grant summit and everything, I don't think we have the thought that we have it completely figured out and we're never going to have anything to learn. But I do think that we have staff that does very well at seeking out grants, and that's why I wanted to back up and point that out.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the more mature interpretation of what I was trying to say. But I do, because I see how hard our team works in applying for and administering those grants, and doggone it, you have a great team that really knows that in order to provide services to this community we love and care about, we've got to seek grant funds, and we do, and always have. I mean, it's just kind of cool to see.
And I think it's good also to point out in terms of our funds and seeing where they sometimes might struggle of the enterprise funds, wastewater is a little bit of the one that it's hard to really keep up with the wastewater expenses, I guess. And I just really appreciate the team's work to try to keep our infrastructure going so that we can succeed.
Absolutely. There's daily operations that need to occur to ensure that people enjoy the health, safety, and welfare that we provide as a governing body as far as the services offered. The last thing we want to do is have someone turn their tap on and not feel confident in drinking that water. Or flush their toilet and not it's going to be handled appropriately. You take a lot of pride, and it takes a lot of investment to ensure that that pride is put to work to maintain the infrastructure in the plant and the day-to-day operations. And, I'll get off my soapbox, but I'm just grateful for the team.
Thank you.
Moving on to the airport fund, Mayor and Council, the airport fund budget is a total of $6.4 million, which reflects an increase of about $2.6 million, and that's because of a couple large capital improvement projects. I guess just to continue to drum and talk about grants, this budget proposes $4.5 million in FAA grants and just about $1 million in YDOT grants to support our capital improvements. Revenue assumptions as far as the airport operations goes is $272,000 that's generated from lease fees and operating fees. These are like our landing fees for SkyWest Airlines, for Key Lime, who provides cargo, and then the hangar leases and the other leases we have at the airport. It also assumes about $100,000 in revenue from the passenger facility charge. And these revenues are used to offset the operating expense of the airport of about $727,000. About half is generated at the airport in revenue against its expenses. And as we talked about earlier, the general fund supports the other side of that. There's 5.7 planned in capital investments and capital improvement projects. The largest will be a pavement and improvement project for a general aviation side of the airport, and then also the parking lot is going to be improved as well. We talked a little bit about direct distribution and supplemental funding. The way that the general fund is going to support airport operations and match those grants from the state and the feds is through an allocation of that supplemental funding. We're budgeting to use some of that 2.1 million to go towards the airport. 355,000 would go towards operating expenses, and 230,000 will go to match those capital grants. You'll notice the bar graphs for the airport fund vary significantly, and that's largely due to the capital projects. And thank goodness that while the FAA imposes mandates as it relates to airport operations, and thank goodness they do as well, because we want a safe environment for our flying passengers, but they also pay for the majority of those mandates to the tune of about 95%. Any questions about the airport fund?
Do we have anything in this budget, or do we have plans in terms of future trying to get our terminal expanded?
Thank you, Your Honor. We continue to apply for grants through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or IDJA, as administered by the FAA. We have one more round of application of the original 5 that were allowed, and we're going to put everything we can to making a competitive application to expand the terminal. If we're not successful on this last round as it relates to this one revenue source, what we'll do is we'll work with the FAA and include it in our airport improvement plan, what we oftentimes refer to as the WASIP. That's something that we utilize, those entitlement funds that we've talked about before, where if we have 10,000 enplanements or greater, we receive a direct allocation of grant funds to support capital infrastructure. And if we don't get this grant, we'll plan to include the terminal expansion as part of that airport improvement plan.
And I think we've done, kind of on the airport conversation, but Airport Road, we've done about 1 million grant requests for improvements to Airport Road, and
Yes, sir, and we have another one in this year.
but just wanted to make sure.
The number.
Thank you.
It might be 1,000,001 and we'll get it. Your Honor, that covers our general fund and our airport fund. Without any other questions, let's cover some of the other funds that are included in your fiscal year 26 budget. The first is going to be easy to cover. We did have a cost center, or more appropriately stated, a fund as it related to the optional economic development tax. Since it did not receive its renewal by Fremont County voters, that will no longer be included in the budget moving forward. Also, the $24,000 payment that we've been putting towards the Riverwalk property as a partnership with the Depot Foundation and Idea Inc. Will no longer need to go forward because we paid off the balance of that loan this current fiscal year. So the Economic Development Fund is not included in your budget. However, the 1% optional excise tax does have its own cost center. As previously mentioned, there's about $3 million budgeted in that to go towards the ballot-approved uses. And for those that voted for that or even voted against it, they'll remember reading that the optional 1% tax goes towards road infrastructure, bridges, water, and sewer improvements. And that's how we as a staff propose those and also work with the Fix Our Road Citizen Committee for prioritizing projects. We do account for user fees that come from the use of the 911 system. There's about $30,000 that's accounted for in that, and that's similar to the current fiscal year. We talk about airport fund, and I want to make sure it's clear that the airport fund and air service fund are two very different things, and they cannot commingle. Airport is all about operating Central Wyoming Regional Airport. The air service fund strictly addresses the commercial air service that provides service to our county. Fiscal year 26 includes $1.78 million to match state funds to keep commercial air service in Fremont County. Costs for air service are covered by a positive fund balance or a reserve that was generated by the optional 0.5% tax before it was defeated. What I like to tell folks is when it comes to covering the cost of commercial air service, the defeat of the optional 1% tax creates a challenge as we look to the future. However, thanks to that tax, we do have an ability to continue to fly and fly confidently. People can book their flights and book, their trip to Disneyland or go see their mom or do something more fun that I can't think about right now and not worry about their flight not happening in the next year. Costs will be covered, the contract is covered, so people can book with confidence. We also include about $100,000 towards marketing for commercial air service, and the majority of that, $80,000, is covered by a grant. I don't know why. Disneyland and visiting grandma is the funnest thing I can think about. We have a fiduciary fund as it relates to managing the senior center endowment. You'll notice that the endowment fund is $881,000. Fiscal year 26 projects $5,000 of revenue from interest, and then also about $140,000 transfer, and that's from the interest earned off of the corpus towards improvements towards the senior center. The Riverton Rendezvous is the fund that supports the Rendezvous Balloon Committee, and forgive me, that's a typo. It says fiscal year 25, but it should say fiscal year 26. Shows that $10,000 worth of funds will come from the rec board, $10,000 from the visitor council, and it also anticipates about $31,000 in program revenue. Our last funds that we'll go through is the Tourism Asset Development Fund, or the TAD Fund. This was a newly created fund in fiscal year 25. This relates to the Wind River Visitor Council. What we're projecting in fiscal year 26 is about $81,000 that will be received, and you as a council have already made awards for the calendar year, and we're excited to support those entities that receive TAD dollars and will help promote Wind River Country and maybe more specifically Riverton. Fiscal year 26 also includes the addition of a new fund. This is the Opioid Settlement Fund. As we talked about this as a team, we thought there would be a better way to account for and manage the opioid settlement funds that we opted into several years ago. Previously, these have been accounted for in the Mayor and Council Cost Center. We just felt that it was better to remove them from the Mayor and Council Cost Center, bring it into its own fund, because these settlements will be coming in for about another 10 years, as it relates to some of the settlements we're participating in. Fiscal year 26 shows a transfer of about $173,000 that's already been collected and about $90,000 of new settlement allocations. And we'll be able to work with you as a governing body this upcoming fiscal year and, quite frankly, in fiscal years to come about the right way to utilize these funds to abate the opioid crisis. Before moving on, are there any questions as it relates to the other funds of the City of Riverton?
Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
Kyle, when you talk about the opioid funds, where is the source of that?
Your Honor, Councilman, it's from several national settlements. The city had opportunity to participate in what's called the 1YO and 1YO2 subdivision agreements. We opted in with the state of Wyoming to receive part of the national settlements that come from entities like Johnson & Johnson, Walmart, Walgreens, Purdue Pharma, and some of the others that were directly maybe involved in the opioid crisis.
So that source of funds came from that corporate structure. Where are the funds being held, or are they distributed on an annual basis?
Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Councilman, the majority of them are distributed on an annual basis. And because we were a participant in that 1YO and 1YO2 subdivision agreement, basically as a state of Wyoming, we banded together with other communities to participate in the tort settlements that cover the entire nation. So we had opportunity. We could have opted in individually as the City of Riverton. We did not. We opted in with the state of Wyoming and other communities. There is a firm, is what I'd call it, that manages the settlements that were reached as part of the tort lawsuits, and they allocate the amount to those that participate in our subdivision agreement. I hope I clearly explained that.
Thank you.
As we talk about the general fund and the enterprise funds, we need to also discuss administrative allocation. Fiscal year 26 includes an administrative allocation from the enterprise funds to the general fund of $1,511, $1,511,274. This is about 2% less than what was proposed in fiscal year 25. In brief, admin allocations serve the purpose to offset some of the administrative and overhead costs that the general fund provides to the enterprise funds. An easy way to explain this is we don't have an attorney in each of the enterprise funds, nor do we have a payroll software in each of the enterprise funds or other administrative support. And so because those funds rely on the services of some of those general fund cost centers, the enterprise funds pays for them or reimburses them to the general fund. This administrative allocation is reviewed every year by our auditors, and also Ms. Harris and I go through it to ensure that it is responsible and respective to the services that the general fund does provide to the enterprise funds. We should also note part of your budget is to pay down some of the loans that the city of Riverton has incurred over time. It's actually easier to read than on my screen. But you'll see that we have loans across the general fund, water fund, sewer fund, and airport fund. They are on an amortization schedule, and what we owe in fiscal year 26 on those schedules is included in your budget. I'll briefly talk about this because I know the folks in the audience would love it if I moved on a little bit quicker and got to the second item. But the budget does propose the community service contract allocation. Right now, there is a placeholder of $240,000. Staff put that placeholder in just because that is what you had awarded in fiscal year 25. It is completely and entirely your discretion if you want to increase that or decrease that or handle it as you choose. Funds to support community service contracts come from the supplemental funding or direct distribution allocation. That's kind of how we parse out the way to pay for community service contracts of the revenues received by the city. 14 entities submitted requests totaling $517,000. So clearly that placeholder of $230,000 is significantly less than the requests, and you'll have opportunity to discuss and prioritize those as a council. To close out the presentation, and we've talked a lot about capital, we've talked a lot about the grants that we seek to support capital improvements and also the funds that we use to cover them. But in brief, and you do have these in your budget workbooks, is an outline of the capital budget for the general fund. You'll notice that it is $2.8 million. It started at just over $3.5 million. As we've gone through the exercise of presenting you a balanced budget, we have had to make very hard decisions about the critical and maybe the less critical proposals. It's getting hard as staff to do that because almost everything is critical. And I am proud of our team because they don't put fluff in the budget. And when we make decisions to present to you, it's truly a deliberation as a team to ensure that we're providing service but also being fiscally sound. Grants do support $1.9 million of that $2.8 proposal. Another similar run through, and we've talked a little bit about this when we talked about the water fund, but capital is proposed at 1.8. We do have those additional funds to support that capital, and the team cut about $1 million through the budget process out of the water fund budget just because we knew we didn't have the funds to cover it, and we need to prepare for the next 5 years of capital investments as well. Wastewater fund is a little bit of a larger capital proposal at 3.9. And I don't think I have the right number, excuse me. That's a copy and paste error for that WCDA amount. I'll make sure that you have that right amount in the final budget. That's what supports the water fund. In fact, I can communicate that to you right now.
660? Oh, no.
So the WCDA grant is not that 660,000. That's what's in the water fund. It's 2,601,000. So excuse me for that error. The SLIB amounts and the optional 1% amounts are accurate, though. This capital cost center or capital proposal started at 4.1 million. And this was after Brian already trimmed things down with his team. So you can see the effort that was put towards presenting these improvements. Much of the sanitation fund goes towards the purchase of a new mechanical street sweeper. The current sweeper that we have is out of state. We hope that we can repair it and get it back online. And we've also been able to partner with a local entity to sweep our streets. It's a personal pet peeve when I see dirt and gravel in the gutters, and this spring was pretty rough on us because we just didn't have the equipment. So we're going to do what we can to have the equipment to provide the service, and that's through this mechanical street sweeper.
Will that mean if we can get ours fixed, we'll have two?
Your Honor, we would have to, the second, or the current unit we had is better suited for fall cleanup, picking up leaves and that. The other unit, the mechanical, is good, better for the heavier debris we see in the springtime and throughout the summer.
So repurposing a little bit.
Repurposing.
Your Honor, we've talked probably enough about the airport fund and its capital, so I won't spend a lot of time here. And with that, that's a high-level run-through of your budget. It took us about an hour. We could have spent more time, but I think the best that we can do is be available to you as you go through your workbooks and communicate to us so we can propose a budget that is one that you're comfortable with and one that meets your desires as a governing body by that June 10th adoption date. I really couldn't have done any of this without a strong team throughout our organization and also without your support, because this is your budget. And I really express my gratitude and appreciation. Riverton's a great place to work. It's a great place to live. We have people that don't just see problems, but try to solve them. Anybody can talk about a problem, but it takes real people to see them and solve them. And that's the type of team that you have here in Riverton. And that's what I think we all enjoy about public service. So thank you, and I appreciate this opportunity to present the budget to you.
Any questions, comments?
I
I just have a comment. Prior to sitting in this seat, I was really critical of the city's budget and how it was operated, and having the opportunity to sit in a couple of work sessions. I have nothing but respect for what you and the staff has done. You guys have made critical cuts. You've listened to us. You have worked incredibly hard, and you deserve a pat on the back. You truly do. You guys are absolutely amazing, and I'm proud to be sitting here working alongside of you. So thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your involvement through the process.
Of course, I like to.
Councilwoman Pearson Lewis?
Yeah, I'd like to say that I read the 130 pages, and I will tell you, I was shocked. To decrease that amount of money and that percentage in a time when inflation is what it is, and to respect our employees like that with that pay increase, I was not only shocked but impressed and grateful. You know, I love Riverton. I love what we do here. But it was a very humbling thing for me. I was just very impressed. I came into your office, and that was the first thing that I said to you. I was like, wow, this was not many, there's not many staff that could have done it. And yeah, you guys did. So good job. Way to go. Yeah.
Thank you. Anything else?
Your Honor.
Mr. Bailey?
Again, as with our own personal budgets and business budgets and all that, we never are gonna have enough money to do all the things that we wanna do. So again, I applaud you for having to make those tough decisions. And, you know, we all wanna get Airport Road rebuilt. We just don't know where to find the $12 or $13 million it's gonna take to do it. And we all wanna, you know, fix our water system that they say we're gonna need to spend $70 million over the next 25 or 30 years. We're gonna have to do it just one bite at a time and do the best that we can. And so I hope the public understands what we're up against. And, you know, no matter what, we're gonna sort of come up lacking, but we're gonna do the best job we can with what we have to do with. And, you know, cities and even counties somewhat are extremely limited on our ability to generate more revenue to do more things. You know, we get whatever percent of property tax that we get. We don't have any control over what that is. You know, we get our sales tax revenue. Again, we don't have any control over what that is for the most part. We get to vote on the 1% or the half a cent or whatever, but, you know, those revenue opportunities are pretty limited. Yeah, and if we raised the ticket price on an airplane ride to Denver enough to cover the costs without any federal and state grants, it'd cost you $2,000 to fly to Denver. Well, and then nobody would fly to Denver and we wouldn't have an airport. So, you know, we have to really appreciate all those grants that we're able to get because, and it's our money we send to them and they give it back to us. So, I mean, you know, we're paying it. But, you know, when I first sat in the seat, similar to Karen, I was like, well, I don't know why we have to have all those grants until you start looking at it, and it's 50% of our budget, give or take, you know, in getting grants to be able to do the things that we need to do. So it's a challenging situation. So, thank you.
Just a quick clarification, if I may, Your Honor. With the parking lot improvement up at the airport, as Councilman Bailey was speaking about, is that part of a grant, or I know it's a capital improvement project, but is that by way of grant as well?
Your Honor, Councilwoman, yes, it is. That is through the Airport Improvement Program. So 95% of that cost will be covered by the feds. 2.5% will be covered by the state of Wyoming, which means our budget will take 2.5% of that total cost.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Well, Mr. Butterfield, thank you very much, and thank you very much for our senior staff and all of our staff members. This is, I would encourage our citizens to read through the budget. I become familiar with it, not necessarily because there's going to be a test. There might be. But because I think it's important to know what the priorities are for the city of Riverton. One of the first things that I learned, I think, as a Masters of Public Administration student was budgets are priorities. And I really applaud you in terms of, for example, looking at the payroll increases that I think we've tried to keep up with the increases over the years for cost of living. And the reality is there's a lot of people in the city that would like to work for the city of Riverton. And I've learned that. I just spoke with one the other day. It was an interesting conversation that Mr. Nichols could probably tell you about. But anyway, not that he was the one, but it was.
I just got really excited.
But we have people that see it as a good place to work, and I think that's important. And I think that kind of environment is important to create because it helps create that atmosphere and that attitude of public service that we need. That we are here to serve the public. We are here to make sure that living in Riverton is the best that it can be. We want to make it something that people seek out, that they want to live here, they enjoy living here. And I think for the most part, a lot of that comes from our employees. When you call with an issue, they're going to answer the phone, they're going to be pleasant, they're going to try to work with you and figure out solutions and not just try to pass you along to the next person. And I feel like we have a lot of people that try to do that. And I think it starts at the top, and that's you, and that's you. So thank you very much for the spirit of service that we have with our staff.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right. Our next item, fiscal year 2026 contract for services discussion, also known as Mayor Hancock wishes he could give everyone the money they want.
Yes,
We discussed right before the meeting
absolutely
started.
correct.
Your Honor, if you'll just give me a second, I can transition.
We want to take a brief recess. It gets a little warm in here sometimes. Let's just take a 10-minute recess. That'll give you a chance to readjust. Everybody here a chance to kind of stand up, and then we'll get into the discussion here. So we'll be in recess until 8:20 p.m. By the way, Kyle, your family's very cute.
They're adorable.
Thank you. While we're on break, little man was playing stuff.
Where's your boy at? Is he second?
He's third.
Third? Okay.
He about got clocked in the face with a bat today at T-ball though.
Oh,
Like the one time he actually pays attention and starts running home, the kid at home was still swinging and it was a near miss. And he had no idea either. Like,
oh, gee.
we're yelling at him to stop and he touched the, and went right to the dugout. And I was like, well, all's well that ends well.
Yeah.
All's well that ends
My
well.
fifth at that age just had no sense of self-preservation. Just he would, anything. All right, we're at 8:20 now, so we are back in session. Next item on the agenda is item 8, fiscal year 2026 contract for services discussion. Mr. Butterfield, if you want to get us started on this.
Absolutely. I'll be brief. You had opportunity to receive presentations in April from those that applied for community service contract funds. Again, 14 organizations submitted, and they're all great organizations for our community, and we appreciate what they do. The total requested amount across all the applications was $517,268. Tonight, you have opportunity to prioritize the requests that you've received. You will not be taking action as this is a work session. The formal action as it comes to the award of these contract for services or community service contracts will occur on June 10th as part of the budget adoption. So what we'll do is we'll get your feedback on the amount to be awarded and then also the priority of those that you would like to award, but you won't be taking action tonight. Each of you had opportunity to individually prioritize and propose funding for the entities that have submitted. I have compiled those and created an average, and I'll just throw that up, and I can zoom in to make it easier for each of you to see that, but you'll notice that the column where my cursor is represents the average response of the council members from the individual forms you provided. This is the percentage of the request versus that average. We can utilize this column, or I can input numbers as you discuss the awards tonight. The column in the orange color is the amount requested. Prior awards of those that requested this fiscal year are represented in the columns to the right. With that, Your Honor, I will leave it to you and allow you to have opportunity to discuss this with the governing body as it relates to the amount and the awards you'd like to prioritize.
Thank you. So first off, let me just say, so that everybody in the audience can appreciate this, this is a very awkward thing to do. And by that I mean, we are all standing up here, you're all sitting down there, and like Mr. Butterfield said, we believe in your programs. Each of you came and presented to us, and I think that each of you have something amazing to offer our community. So there's nothing worse than trying to put a number to an organization when members of that organization are sitting down in the audience. So I just want you to appreciate that if we stumble over our words or we say anything that sounds a little bit crazy, we think so too. We do think it sounds a little bit crazy too, but we're trying to do our best to get people asking for this much money when we have this much money. That's probably about the right percentage.
Less than half.
And we recognize that things are tighter for a lot of your organizations right now, with the fact that, for example, the county is no longer providing funding for social programs, and so that means that things are a little bit difficult. There's some questions about grant funding going forward with some of the changes to grants and that sort of thing, and accountability for grants. So I just want you to know, I recognize that, we recognize that. And as we do this, I hope you'll just be patient with us and realize that this is not necessarily meant to be a reflection of your mission or you. It's meant to be a reflection of where we can put money and where we can afford to put money. So as we continue, I just want you to have that as a thought in mind. Now, the next thing I would say is, in years past, the way we have kind of done this is we have looked at the average, and we have used that as a starting point for discussion. And we've kind of said, here's what the average is of everyone. Do we want to go above that, below that? Where do we want that to be? I would say one of the easiest ones that we could probably dispense of right now would be the Riverton volunteer firemen. Every single person, I think, had said we should fund them 100%. And I would think, just in terms of what you could put on for that, and this isn't anything we're voting on, but does anybody have a problem with just basically going with everybody put them at 5,000? We put them at 5,000.
Yeah.
Okay. From there, I guess we could look at just alphabetical or however we want to do it. Where do you guys want to start discussion?
Well, sorry, Your Honor, can I talk?
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's do it with percentage like you started. What do you think, guys?
So
Highest percentage or lowest percentage, whatever. What do you want to do?
I'm going to have to open up my own.
Let's knock out the lowest percentage first. Let's do that.
I would say anything below 10%, we could start with that.
I like that idea.
You're saying percent of requests versus the average, or what are you?
Yeah, like,
average.
let's look at the average percentage and knock those out first. Like, look at what we think those should be, yes or no, or what we should do, and then
Okay.
go to the higher.
So we could start, the lowest percentage of requests versus the average, if we were going to look at that, that would probably be Volunteers of America. There was only one person that proposed any funding for Volunteers of America. I think if that's the way it's going to be, we could probably just say, it seems like the consensus of the council is not to fund that. Any comment there, Eric? It's hard when I can't see you.
Agreed.
Okay.
Time delay. He's far, far away.
Yes, yeah, it gets hard.
Your Honor, do we know if do they receive state funding at all?
They receive funding from a lot of different places.
So it's not a huge,
And it's a larger organization that's beyond just Fremont County. One of the reasons why Riverton previously funded them was because it was an alternative to incarceration. And so the idea was that we were bringing folks there rather than bringing them to the jail. Where that gets a little bit difficult is they have not traditionally been providing those beds if we do not fund them as like a promise, but they still do have them available. They still do want the funding. It gets a little bit of a difficult balance. Part of the reason why, and spoiler alert, I was the one who recommended funding for them. Part of the reason why I was recommending funding for them is just because I believe in their mission and they do a lot for the community, much the same as any of the other organizations that we have. They do have other alternative funding available, but that's kind of where I was at.
Okay.
But I'm very comfortable with being the minority. I don't have any problem with that. If you look at my numbers, I expect I will be for a lot of these. Okay, so the next one was 3%, Cup of Cold Water Ministries. That one, we only had one as well. Any thoughts as to that one in terms of what we want to do with funding going forward?
Is the person here that's doing that?
She is.
Yes, yeah. Can I ask a few questions?
Sure. Do you want to come up here, if you would like, and tell us your name and?
Hello, I'm Shanna Choate with Good Portions Under a Cup of Cold Water.
Shannon, so you requested 13,000, right?
Yeah, and I did say at that meeting that we had raised an additional, I think, 3,000.
So what would be, like, you know, what would be your minimum?
Honestly, anything helps us out. We probably spend, right now, over the winter, the supply isn't as demanding, so summer, we're spending a lot more money on food, which is roughly like $350 a week that we're spending just on food. So anything helps, but, you know, we also provide transportation and stuff to probation and different things like that too, but yeah.
Oh, you do? And then,
And just, I guess, as a reminder for the public that are watching and for the council, for the most part, what are you doing with the food? I mean, just tell us, 1,000-foot view, what do you do?
We set up twice a week in Riverton and we feed anyone in need, whether they're living on the street, we have families who show up. And then we also serve at the warming hut once a week. And so that would have been stopping, except they're staying open as a sober hut. And there's no other organization that brings lunch in there. They provide breakfast and dinner. And so we are going to continue to serve lunches there once a week as well.
And so
We have a food trailer that we use as a mobile food kitchen. So we're serving already prepared food, which, you know, they can't, the people who are out on the street can't necessarily go and get food from the food pantry and have a way to prepare that. So we're just kind of filling that gap.
Well, I appreciate it. Any other?
I do have a few questions. So would you say, like, as far as your, like, impact in Riverton, could you give me a number or, you know, just give me an idea of, like, you know, economic impact or, you know, social impact? Tell me how you do, you know, what you do there.
Okay, we serve roughly 35 to 40 meals when we're out. That goes up a little bit in the summertime. We also partner with people who are attempting to get off the street, get sober, just getting them to different programs, to probation, going to court hearings with them, vouching for them where appropriate to do so, and really just connecting them with other organizations in town if there's, you know, availability for housing for them. We also occasionally provide hotel rooms for families. So over the winter, there were 3 different families that we assisted with emergency, either motel rooms or transportation, Christmas, things like that.
Thank you, Shanna.
Thank you. Do we want to kind of come back to that here a little later, or where are we at with that?
Your Honor, I'm in support of giving something, anything, like,
Okay?
Your Honor, I would just say, I don't want to take away from the goodness that these folks are providing, the meals that you're providing, the help that you're providing. There are multiple requests for funding to feed people within our community. And I don't know that relying on the city to to help with that is always the best option. I feel like if they combined resources, got together and collaborated, and you guys combined forces, you could do great things. And I think that you would have a better option of funding and services to be provided if it was just collaborated together. I mean, they're all wonderful organizations, and you each provide something different that can help somebody in different times of need. And so I directed most of the funding, or suggested most of the funding, towards the things that are, stumbling over my words, as you said, but
I told everybody here, it gets that way.
I tried to direct the funds to things that were imperative to the city. Not necessarily a gesture of goodness. It's great, and I support it. I just don't know that the city's funding can support it.
Well, and I think that's what gets difficult with each of these. And that's part of the difficulty. And I will say, one of the things that has been, I guess, a mission for me for this next year is to try to figure out a little bit better guidance and better way to be able to kind of parse out what we want to do with the contracts for services. We started with the idea of, okay, this was going to pause, and part of the reason for that was because that's something that we would be responsible for if it weren't for pause. Our rec used to be something that was a direct line item in the city's budget, but then kind of moved down to this area. Could you put it somewhere else, or could you adjust some of these? You could. So just in terms of ways that we've looked at this, it depends on the council, it depends on, I guess, the different perspectives, and it's just difficult, especially when it's a mission you believe in. And so my thought would be we could spend probably a whole hour talking about each of the individual ones. I guess, like I said, in terms of being able to kind of work with the averages and work with the percentages, or the number of council members that had in their request had put the number, it feels like it would be us sitting here kind of spinning our wheels a little bit. I personally think that some of these that I believe in the mission and I think that would be deserving of funding, I intend to make my own donations. And so where that comes into play, where it's something that I don't necessarily feel like it's something that we have the support on the council or that sort of thing, I think it's a good way to at least get the word out there for our public to be able to know about your mission and be able to do what they can to assist. So if no one has any objection, though, for right now, just on the basis of what we have for the numbers, my intention would be to go forward with not having any funding going towards Cup of Cold Water Ministries. Bearing in mind, I do encourage our citizens, myself included, to be able to donate to their cause because I think it's important. And I know people that have helped volunteer with you, and I think you do a great job. And I think as a ministry and trying to help people make changes in their lives, it's a great organization, and what you're doing is important and appreciated. So. The next one that we have is the Foundation for Nations Food Pantry. That's one where we're at 3% of the requested. A little bit different than the other ones, though, because we actually have two people who were encouraging funding here. Any discussion here or where we would like to go with that?
Which one is this one? Hold on.
Again, I think, Your Honor, I think we have to put it in the same as the Cup of Water Ministries, where I think we encourage people to give private donations. I have to agree with what Karen was saying about, again, I think a lot of these food pantries and organizations that are feeding people need to get together so that they can combine resources and maybe be a little more effective.
Come on up, you can speak, just let us know your name. The other thing I guess I would say, just so you're aware, as we talk about IPR, because that's one of the ones we're going to talk about. We have funded IPR for many years, and really, for the most part, if you ask Noel Cooper, the director of IPR, why he would want that funding, for him, it's more symbolic than anything. It's the city saying, hey, we're encouraging your mission. The amount of his budget that we actually cover with our $5,000 that we have given over the last couple of years, and I guess it's been 3,000, 4,000, that kind of thing, is fairly small. But the way he describes it is he wants to be able to have the city feel like they're a partner. And there is that kind of thought process in terms of how I was wanting to have some of these funded, and it is something we can keep in mind. All right, tell us your name.
My name's Sonia Fairfield. I'm one of the directors of the Foundations for Nations Food Pantry / Backpack Program for Riverton.
I'm Aubrey Meadow, the other half.
Might be in the pod. I understand and respect what you all are saying and would ask for wisdom from you all as to what we can do, because if we can't get funding for the backpack program, it will end. We are funding it. And at $300 to $500 per week during the school season, 114 to 151 children in this community.
Every week.
Every week. What do you recommend that we do?
Had you had that funded by a grant initially? I'm trying to remember what you had told us, how that
We just
started.
started this in February. We told the schools that we would take it on. We're providing the food. We're buying the food from the state through Mrs. Gordon's Food Bank of Wyoming. And we have community that donate. We donate. We did receive a grant from Walmart of $5,000, which helps with the pantry and the backpack program. It's split in half because the food comes from the pantry. We fed
between January and March, we fed over 2,000 children alone.
in the
This is Riverton kids.
Yes, and so we
So-
need, your wisdom and knowledge would be appreciated on what to do. We are going forward looking for grants, and it's very difficult.
Did anyone from your board attend the grant summit?
Yes, I did.
Good, good. And I will say that they have, and not that I'm saying this is the solution, but I will say it is something that I think can help. They also have ongoing assistance through the grants program through the state of Wyoming. And I think it's great that you're working with with Ms. Gordon's organization. I actually just was in Casper the other day and saw a bunch of trucks in their kind of organization that they have there, so. Councilman Larson.
I was wondering when you said 2,000 or 2,200, what the age group was. Is that school age 6 through 12, or is that 0 through 18? What are
It's elementary kids, and then we also provide snacks for the high school students.
No, it's all
Okay.
ages. So that number includes pantry plus backpack program from January to March. So it's 0 to 18. But the majority of those kids are kindergarten through 12th grade.
I have a dog, no kids, but I have a love to feed them. I mean, the kids, not,
And the dogs, too.
and the dogs too.
And because we started in February, so that number is actually, for the backpack program, only February and March. January's just part of the pantry, the kids that we feed through there.
So before that, if you started at that date, what was happening in September and October, November and December? Nothing?
No, we still feed children through the pantry.
No, you said you started in
The
February.
backpack program started in February. So there's a backpack program that we facilitate that is in the school districts right now, that we feed kids every weekend. There's also the food pantry that we feed kids through.
So we're the distribution center.
Yeah.
Our food pantry is the distribution center for the backpack program. We organize it so the schools don't have to. We gather the food, we put all the bags together, and then we give it to the schools, and they distribute it to the kids.
So the school distributes it, but you make it?
Correct.
You organize it?
We pay for it, we organize it.
Wow.
Councilwoman Johnson?
I know it's not a fix-all, but I don't think any kid should ever go hungry.
Correct.
No matter what. And whereas I don't think the city's in a position to help financially, there are options out there. And maybe organizing like a monthly food drive, letting people know
Do that.
that I have never seen it, and I'm happy to help spread the word however I can. But I think Riverton's community is a very giving community, and I think once the word's out there wholeheartedly that you guys are in need of donations, either monetarily or food that they can bring down with a list, I think if we can circulate that word a little better, I think you can have a little more success with it.
Thank you, we appreciate
Of course. And I'll get with you, and I'll get some information, and I'll help spread the word.
it. Okay, thank you.
You bet.
And thank you very much for what you do for our community, and that's the broader community too. It's not just Riverton. You really do a lot for the entire county, and I recognize that. And I
Your Honor.
appreciate your hard work.
I have a question though for Kyle, I guess. Since we're so good at grants, are there any, do you think, grants that we could send these ladies, like, their way?
Your Honor, Councilwoman, I'm not aware of any off the top of my head, but we'd be happy to see where we can help.
Yeah, because I imagine, I bet there's something. Have you two looked into that?
Yes,
Yeah.
very extensively. Since September last year, we've been pursuing grants fervently, and unfortunately, like the USDA grants and
That's the ones I was
that
thinking
have
of, yeah.
gotten cut funding-wise.
Of course.
And because we are at 100% poverty level, it's the TFAP, so that's the Emergency Food Assistance Program, that got cut also. So it's a trickle-down effect. We have pursued grants. We did this is exciting for the state of Wyoming and for City of Riverton. There's a pilot program, food grant that we just were awarded to purchase burger cows and sweet corn from Lindsay and Rowdy Anderson. And not the cows are coming from Hurricane Cattle Company, but it's a pilot program through the Wyoming Department of Family Services. And we just had a meeting today with that pilot program, and they told us that Wyoming's the first. This is like revolutionary for everyone to keep produce and supply everything's local. And so we're really excited about that. That takes care of pantry. We also need funding for backpacks. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. Yeah, but I'm
So we'll
open.
have meat now, we're
Yeah.
excited.
That's
Where's the
wonderful.
beef?
Meat
It'll
and
be
sweet
with
corn.
us.
But as far as funding goes specifically for backpacks, it all runs through typically a food pantry. And so the burden's left on the food pantry to pursue that, which we are. You guys are just, an avenue for funding. So we are continuing to pursue other grant options. We are a nonprofit, so that limits on some stuff that we can pursue, but.
We were just given a used van, so now
Yeah.
we'll have a way to distribute
Yeah.
so we have hit the
We're
ground.
working.
Yeah.
We're just, it's America. There should be no child hungry.
Absolutely.
We are really passionate about keeping that going. But unfortunately, the reality is that there's no funding, it will have to stop.
What did you say, what kind of backpacks did you say that you send them home with? What did you say that you?
They're just plastic bags because of health concerns and getting those bags back, but they're just plastic bags.
Did you talk to Smiths or anybody like that about donations or anything like that?
Not yet. Smith's has been really good for other stuff.
yes.
Their grant application's very intensive and in-depth, so I haven't pursued that yet, but.
Okay,
But they have helped reduce some of the prices when we go to buy things. They allow us to get extra when you're only allowed 2
Right.
cases, they allow us to get 4 carts full of stuff, so we've been able to do that with them. But we provide 2 meals, lunches or dinners, and then 2 breakfasts, a couple snacks. 2 snacks. We try to put fresh fruit in there for them, granola bars and,
So we are pausing for summer because of funding and also because they do have a summer food program. I do not know the state of that, though. I heard they lost their funding a lot, so I don't know. I had heard they were still keeping it going, but we're pausing. So this week will be our last week until August
Okay.
or when the school year starts again. So we're trying to get, what did we decide? I think right now we're sitting at 4,800 total for the fiscal year 25-26 school year. So we need funding, but we're still pursuing it.
Okay.
Right?
thank you very
Thank you.
much for listening.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Well, thank you for being here, and if nothing else, I think trying to bring awareness to it, and I appreciate you and all that you're doing, and
You will see
Good work.
We'll see more of us, so.
good. We're lucky. Okay, so again, at this, the average was 500. Do we want to be funding this, or do we want to be going with basically the majority that had this at 0?
I think we need to give them something.
I would suggest 0 just simply because we aren't funding the other food service programs that are feeding as well.
You wanted to give some,
Yes.
Mr. Bailey, Mr. Larson, Mr. Carr? Any thoughts? Not trying to put you on the
Already
spot.
gave mine.
These are going to our children, right? These are going to children.
Anything to add, Councilman Carr?
Nothing at this time, thanks.
Okay. I like the idea of 500, but
Very-
I think we're in the minority in that. That's okay. For now, I guess we'll put it at 0, and we'll talk about ways we can assist in the future, I suppose. Okay. Next one that we have would be CATS. We've funded CATS 2022, 2023, 2024. Thank you very much for coming in. The requested amount was 12,000. We had 2 council members who had proposed funding for CATS. Probably the 2 council members that actually use their services. I guess starting with the discussion, it's a little bit different for this one. The other ones, we've been at 1%, 3%. Average is at 1,000. We could put it at the average. We could put it at 0. Any discussion there? We can always just put in a number and then kind of work our way around it, too. I guess, for example, Kyle, if you could, just for the rest of them, if we just put in the average, what would our total be? Would it be,
251.
oh, nice job, look at you. Well, but you'd have to subtract,
You'd have to take the couple little ones out of there, but still,
250
we're still 10 grand above what we,
have in the budget right now. Yeah. So maybe we ought to talk about these then before we start looking at that.
Yeah.
Thoughts on CATS? I've appreciated partnering with CATS over the last couple of years. I do believe that it kind of fits similar with what we fund for our rec. I think benefits youngsters in the community. They do have their own funding in terms of memberships. They also do some fundraising, that sort of thing. They don't have a lot of employees. So to me, I like the idea of funding them to some extent. I don't think we necessarily need to do 5,000, which is what we've done in the past. I think we need to recognize we're in a different situation with FCAG, or I'm sorry, WRTA, and some of these other amounts that we've been discussing. So if you're going to fund that more, you kind of need to sacrifice somewhere.
Your Honor, yeah,
Councilman Bailey?
I think, again, I think we need to focus on more essential services that provide services to a greater group of the community. And so, as much as I like all of these things, like we've said many times already, all of these organizations do good work, but I think we have to just focus on trying to give to the ones that provide the greatest amount of service to the most people. So
Okay,
I would vote against this one.
Your Honor, I would agree with Councilman Bailey on that.
Councilman Larson?
I got instructions from my wife not to have my name appear in the newspaper.
Well, you've already ruined that. You shouldn't have said a word.
But I'm with Mike. I feel for every one of these, there's not a bad one on the list. They all do honorable work. Unfortunately, with 240,000, it does not divide up very well. So I'm inclined, and that's what my shows, I want the biggest bang for my buck. And that's the way I feel. And Mr. Butterfield has my score sheet.
Right. Okay. You and me again, Becca. But like I said, this is basically Mayor Hancock wants to give everybody money, and we don't have the money to give. Okay, at least for right now, then working. Mr. Carr, anything to add? I just heard you move your mic.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just to iterate all of the other comments, this one was really hard for me. I deeply appreciate their mission. However, getting back to those essential services that don't have the ability to quote unquote charge at the door, it's a tough situation, but my recommendation would stand solely based on their ability, hopefully, to raise those funds through either walk-in cost or additional fundraising. So thank you.
Okay. I think we're kind of out of some of the lower numbers. Might as well just go, I think, maybe alphabetical here. Injury prevention. We had them, the request was 5,500. Traditionally have given them 5,000, 4,000, depending on the year. The average that we have there would be 3.3 thousand, basically 3.357. Do we want to just go with the average for this one, or do we want to do something different? Or go with maybe an even 3,000 to try to make up for some of these to get us closer to
I think
240?
that would be a good number to start with.
I would be okay with 3,000.
We don't have to, I mean, again, we're not voting, we're just kind of trying to get an idea here. Maybe let's just put 3,000 there for now, and we can come back and examine it later.
Your Honor, if I could share with you, Mr. Cooper was not able to be here tonight because he's attending the CWC Film Festival as a partner in that event. He did ask to please send his apologies that he couldn't be here, and it said, if you are able and willing to remind them that any amount of funding shows investment into our agency and the work we accomplish within the community is valued.
Thank you. I guess that was kind of some of my thought with some of the other ones. That's his attitude, and I really appreciate Mr. Cooper. All right, so if we feel comfortable with that right now, we'll just keep on going on down. Juvenile Justice Services requested 35,000. Traditionally, we've given them 25,000, 21,000, 20,000, 17,000, 25,000, 17,000, 20,000, 7,000 last year. Last year, basically what we had done was took the average of everything. The The average is at 9,285. We do have representatives from Juvenile Justice Services here today. They are funded by the county, as we have discussed. However, they do provide services for a lot of the juveniles in the city of Riverton in terms of supervision for probation, that sort of thing. I guess if anybody has any questions or, we don't want to have just a repeat of the presentations, right? So,
I'll give you some highlights if you would like.
sure, give us a quick highlight.
So Casey Murray, Executive Director for Treatment Courts and Juvenile Justice Services of Fremont County. 10% of Riverton High School's graduating class last year was a member at some level through our program. I think that's important to note. The other thing I think that's important to note is the city of Lander has made it, they've said that the work that we do is integral to their community. They've fully funded us at $35,000. That was our request last year. And a majority of the citations do not come from the city of Lander. A majority of the citations come from the city of Riverton. I think that's important also to note. One of the other things is that the city, or the county has requested that our budget be slashed by at least 10%. If that happens, the state of probation services for the city of Riverton without funding is in danger. And so that may be something that the city of Riverton needs to look at as far as how you would fund probation services if that was no longer available through the county. So I know there are a lot of hard decisions to be made, but when I look at the numbers given, what I am seeing is that kids are not valued because we're giving more money to PAWS than we are to juveniles. That's my feelings. As somebody who's very passionate about this work and just sees the impact that juvenile issues within our community cause, and feeling like we are constantly fighting for these kids. And so I'm up here today to fight for them, because if you do not fully fund us, I can't guarantee that you'll have a position.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Your
Mr.
Honor.
Bailey?
And I really think this is one of those cases where an ounce of prevention's worth a pound of cure kind of a scenario. The money that we pour into these young folks, it pays back multiple times over them, ending up living a life of crime instead of getting put back on the right path and getting themselves organized, so.
And I will just
I
say,
support you guys.
our day reporting center is also so important to this community, and keeping kids on track to graduate is, if we lose these services, we're talking about a massive ripple effect of teenagers with misdemeanor convictions that will impede on their employment. If we don't have day reporting, I think, I pulled the numbers this week, since 2020, we've served well over 100 kids at ERC. Those are kids who would have been expelled. And every statistic in the world will show you, if you are expelled, your chance at graduating is slim to none. So, these are really, really important programs to help kids who can't afford to be turned around, to be turned away and not have services.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. We're just trying to get through stuff quickly and get a general guidance, so appreciate you speaking. The average for this was at 9,285.
We need to fund more than that.
I don't think that's.
We have to.
Well, that's, where would we propose? There were a couple of 20,000 proposals. We had a 15,000 proposal, 10,000, and then a couple of zeros. Where would we want to go?
Your Honor, my recommendation would be 20,000. Nobody's, with the exception of the fire department, I think is being funded at 100%. But these are crucial services, and we do take up a pretty good amount of their time and services, and I think it's only appropriate that they're paid for that. And so I think we should get as close as we possibly can to their requested amount.
We can plug in 20,000 right now, and then we
I'm fine with that.
kind of look at it later and see where we're at. Does that sound good, Mr. Butterfield?
Yes, Your Honor. And, excuse me, as you go alphabetically, I just want to bring up that we have not discussed Eagles Hope transition yet, if you are working alphabetically down the list.
Well,
We don't know the
that's not how the alphabet works. When you're going alphabetically, you start with where you were. You don't start at the top. I'm just kidding. Eagles Hope transitions. Let's go there. Thank you, Mr. Butterfield. We're at an average of 23,000 here. The requested amount was 53,000. I think we've been all over the place with Eagles Hope. Used to just fund them to the tune of about 4,000, went up to 6,000, 2021 went to 16,000. I think that was kind of a little bit concurrent with the change with VOA. And then 47,000, 2021, 2022, 20,000, then 35,000 for the years past. That's where I had placed them, where I think Councilman Bailey had placed them. Councilman Carr, trying to be an outlier, placed them higher than that.
Your Honor,
Yes, sir.
I actually have a correction to that value. That should be 35,000 for mine. I had a hidden row in my spreadsheet, and I needed to readjust that, so I apologize about that.
It's because you thought outlier was an insult, didn't you?
No.
I'm just kidding. So we're averaged at 21,000. I think people know where I stand on Eagles Hope. I believe they're very important services that they provide to the community. I think most of the council has indicated that they believe that they should be funded. The question then becomes to what extent. We could plug in 20,000 right now just as an even number and then come back and discuss and see where we're at the end. Anybody have an issue with that? Okay. So, stick around though.
We're not done.
Yeah. Pause, yes. Could you come up to the microphone and tell us your name? I mean, I know who you are.
Not telling you my name. No, I'm Janet Nyberg. I'm the chair of Eagles Hope Board. And I was going to come see you last night, but in my old age, I didn't do it. In listening to everybody talk, okay, how we don't have a lot of money and it doesn't go very far and all that jazz, I was going to come last night and talk to you with the idea of having a summit of all the nonprofits that serve Riverton and the reservation as well. Have them get together and talk about what services do you provide? Where are we duplicating those services? Where do we have holes? What can we do? And then as an organization of nonprofits, apply for a pretty sizable grant that would be spread out. So just something for you to think about maybe, because this is hard for you to have to make these kinds of decisions, okay? And we're all struggling for money. But I think there's duplication going on, and I think there's some big gaps. And we don't know that if we don't get together. So if you, as the mayor, could maybe say, hey, let's all get together and sit down and talk for an afternoon and see what services are needed, what services are being met, and what aren't. It might help us solve, being able to say for our budget next year, we know this is going to happen, or this is how we're going to do it. So that, I wanted to say thank you for supporting us.
Thank you, but thank you for the work you do. Do you have anything to add, Devin? I mean, you're just the good looks.
Here for support.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, and that's a really good point. We've talked about that for a while, since I've been mayor, I think, in terms of trying to understand and figure out where we have some duplication. I mean, some of these funding requests, it's very obvious that they're the only game in town, so to speak. Transitional living, I mean, that's really where you are at. WRTA isn't even the only game in town, because we have the Senior Citizen Center that provides transportation and a lot of different things like that. So it gets a little bit tricky and it's hard to know. And I do feel like unless you're in the room, kind of like we had Cup of Cold Water Ministries here with Foundation for Nations, you might not know what the other one is doing, and you might not know where you can collaborate. One discussion that we had, and this was started by Bethany Baldez, who formerly was part of the chamber, had been, hey, is there a way that we could have something like they have in Lander, where they have basically the Lander Foundation that gets all the money, and then they kind of work out getting it to the nonprofits within the community, and having something that's a collaborative effort to be able to fundraise so that you're not having everybody coming to you every month or so asking for a donation, and you have something that's a little bit more collaborative. And that was a discussion we had almost 3 years ago, and it never went anywhere, which is okay, but I would say, I guess, if that's something that you think would be a good idea, I'd find some like-minded folks and get it put together. I have no problem working with you however I can, but, I mean, I can say you can certainly use City Hall for it. Just make sure you call ahead and make sure we don't have something else going on in the same location. Mr. Bailey?
You know, and at minimum, at least, we are all gonna find out the services that are out there, and you'll be able to help people by being able to direct them to the right place, at minimum.
Right.
Hopefully, yeah, we can create a way to not duplicate services.
Mr. Carr or Councilman Carr, I think you were wanting to speak. I couldn't tell, though.
No, I didn't have anything to add, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so we're putting that there basically as a placeholder. We'll kind of see where we're at and keep talking. So, next up is pause. The request here was $75,000. Years past, I would say pause has been pretty consistent in terms of what we've funded them. It's been 40 or 45,000. The average of all of the council members was, lo and behold, $41,354.
Your Honor,
Yes, sir.
I apologize. This was another one that I needed to modify. That mine should be 41,500. My apologies.
Oh, that's okay.
You're right in the average.
Who would have thought that an engineer would have made a math mistake? Oh, come on.
Those darn hidden cells. I had to make up for it.
You know, it's funny, I think it was 2 years ago on a budget, or it was this same chart, Mr. Butterfield, that you had a hidden cell that threw everything off, the total was off, and we couldn't figure out what was going on, and you finally found it. It was 2 years ago or last year? 2 years ago. All right, so we have an average then of 38,000. Councilwoman Johnson?
Your Honor, I struggled with this one. And I'll be real honest regarding this one. Routinely, we provide $45,000. That's part of the contract of services agreement that is there. In the application itself, trying to recommend a reasonable amount based off of their actual numbers. And trying to understand how they had broken down their budget. In their budget, there is a line item for veterinary services, and then there's also a line item for medical. And I asked Mr. Butterfield to reach out to them to try to get some clarification on that, and there is zero communication back on that. I don't know why. I think it's useful information to try to determine a reasonable number to give them, more or less. But without any correspondence, it's difficult to make that recommendation.
Okay. I hear you. For right now, as a placeholder, are we good with averaging that up at 40,000 and then discussing it more as we go?
I'm really surprised that we don't have that lady that was here several times. I'm wondering what has happened to her.
She's all right. I spoke to her just a few days ago. I know. I don't know what to tell you.
Okay, thank you.
I did speak with some individuals from PAWS yesterday, by the way, at my office hours that you could have come to, Janet, and you didn't. That it wasn't necessarily about this, so I'm wondering if maybe they didn't quite realize this is one of the times we're going to be talking about this. It would have been helpful to have a representative here, because it wasn't anything they brought up. So I don't know if it just didn't get on their calendar or what. They are trying to be responsible. We had a discussion, if you recall, about this idea of an animal that's brought in by animal control goes to the stock dock. Stock dock works with the animal. Then the animal at no point is being seen by PAWS, but PAWS is paying the bill. So what PAWS has been trying to do is they've changed and has an MOU with the stock dock in terms of they're not going to be paying a bill unless they see the animal. They want to be able to make that determination as to if they're going to be, paying for services for the animal. I feel like PAWS is trying to go in a good direction. I think they've been trying to be responsive to the public. I'm sorry that they haven't been responsive to you. I will reach out to,
It wasn't even to me,
well, then,
Mr. Butterfield, but
I agree with you. But I do just want to say, that hasn't been my experience with them usually, so, and also it's not been my experience with them to not have them here.
And I want to be clear. I'm supportive of PAWS, and I think that they're a good organization, and I think they care well for the animals. But the numbers don't match. And I did have a brief discussion with Dr. Stockton. They paid $14,491. Don't ask me why I remember that right off the top of my head. Through, I believe it was April of 2024, and that was to cure 2023's balance. So there was an additional balance that was incurred through 2024, which is still outstanding. And so I'm just trying to understand, and what I tried to do was separate what is the actual cost, or something even close, of the animals that are brought in by the city. How much are we causing, their costs to go up? And there's no separation there between the animals that are physically dropped off versus the animals that are brought in by the city. So when you're trying to determine how much we're actually costing them to operate, it's difficult to do with no numbers. And with no response, I can't make a reasonable suggestion. I'm not comfortable with 40,000, and I think at some point, they need to, I mean, we can't tell them how to operate or anything of that nature. But when finances are what they are, they need to look at their own budget and figure out how to operate that a little better, for lack of better words.
Well, and I will say too, in terms of that idea of what we're bringing in that's causing medical versus what they're actually bringing in, that's part of the idea of the MOU as well, is that if it's brought in, that would be, the determination would be made, this is a city budget item for this animal versus one for PAWS. Councilman Bailey?
Again, Your Honor, I'm really torn on this one also. Because if we didn't have PAWS, the city of Riverton would be responsible for some kind of cost, depending on what we came up with. But I have a hard time giving them $40,000 and we're not gonna fund juvenile services, which helps kids.
Human beings.
And human beings. And I love animals as much as anybody does, but there's gotta be a priority there. And I think PAWS has started down the right lane, which is questioning some of these things where they're spending $5,000 or $6,000 to fix a cat that got run over. I hate to be cold-hearted, but that's not a good scenario.
Well, and I
We've
think
got to quit doing that.
part of the thought has been that they have to do that because it was brought in by the city, and so they have to cover it. And I agree with you. I agree with you completely, but I think what we need to have is better good fences make good neighbors, and I don't know that we've done very well at figuring out the boundaries and the fences
Yeah.
and where we need to have the city having responsibility versus pause and that kind of thing. And I think that goes to your point,
Well-
Councilwoman Johnson.
A little bit it does, Mayor. I mean, we're housing animals at the PD. You know, we have a contract for services with them to intake our animals, and they can't accept them because they're full for whatever reason. And now we're using the PD, so we're not even able to utilize the services that we're paying for. And I don't think that that's a good scenario.
Right?
Your Honor,
Yes, sir.
maybe just for a point of information, through the years as these funds have been allocated to pause, there's been an agreement of sorts as it relates to the contract for services. In the current agreement that is in place for fiscal year '25, it does state that pause will accept all animals during regular business hours at the shelter from Riverton Police Department and city animal control personnel, or brought to the shelter by city animal control personnel as a result of enforcement of applicable city ordinances. So when there's an at-large dog or cat, the RPD or the ACO, animal control officer, collects. The funding agreement states that pause shall accept them. The agreement also states they will accept them at no cost to the city for the care, maintenance, veterinary services, feeding of any such animal, specifically dogs and cats from the city of Riverton within its limits and jurisdictional boundaries. So the current agreement states that they will accept them, but it sounds like there's maybe opportunity, as we're looking at the upcoming fiscal year and this proposed MOU, to amend that, but the lines were pretty clearly delineated that if they were to receive the community service contract funds, that they would accept those animals that are collected, that are at large, that need to be held until they're claimed or turned over for care by the shelter for adoption.
Have
Also-
we had issues with that, Chief? Has that been something where we have not had pause accept them under the terms of the MOU?
Your Honor, maybe I can just help with that real quick, because I know you have so much to talk about. But as Councilwoman Johnson mentioned, we currently are housing some of these animals in the RPD area because pause does not have room for them. The agreement further outlines that pause will strive to reduce the number of animals that are housed for long periods of time. Occupancy will be reduced over time to alleviate overcrowding. Occupancy will not exceed 25 dogs or 25 cats. And so I think at times they're underneath that threshold for dogs and cats, at other times they're above. And when they're above that, there's no room for them to accept the animals that, by the agreement, RPD should be dropping off to them for their care.
Okay. Appreciate that information. It's good to know.
Your Honor, I think as a placeholder, so we can keep moving, put 20 in there for them, and let's keep going,
Okay. We can do that.
if
Keep
everybody
discussing and
agrees.
Go forward.
Your Honor,
Yes, sir.
just a couple comments. If we were looking at this program as a city program, we'd be discussing at least several $100,000 for just the staff. So I think whatever we put in for a placeholder is a pittance of what we would be paying if it were a department in and of itself. And it really boils down to a public health issue. Yes, on the surface, it's the dogs and cats and animals. But in reality, it's a public health issue for the people of Riverton. So just some comments there. I would certainly prefer if we stayed at the average. I understand all the comments and concerns, but this is an organization that has done very, very well. Have they had issues? Yes. But I think they're trying to rectify that. So in the interest of moving on, maybe we split the difference at 30, but again, we would be talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars if this organization was not there.
I do think it would be helpful if we had better, I guess, reporting to the city in terms of cost and that sort of thing that we would likely be responsible for, just so we can look at this as we were talking about early on and know kind of what services are being provided so that we can better be able to determine how much we want to fund going forward. Even that has been difficult to parse out when we've
Well,
looked at it.
Even if we're costing them more than 45, we can adjust that and go up.
Right,
Without that, there's no way to tell,
right.
or if it's far less, I don't know.
I like the idea of splitting the difference because that's how much Councilman Larson proposed, was 30,000. Just for purposes of going forward.
That works, yeah.
I'm good with that.
The problem with all of this health is the philosophy of the $15,000 cat. My wife started our 71 3/4 ton Chevy truck, and and I said, "Did you ever tap on the hood?" She said, "No." And so there was a Siamese cat that had climbed up inside the garage. 3 days later, it came back, and that Siamese cat that I paid $50 for became a $3,000 cat. They said, "Did you think that possibly we could find another cat for less than $3,000?
You could, maybe.
Well, she never thought about that, but the thing, you have to be, I know this is inhumane, and I am the baddest man in the world, but we have a limit to capital. We are cutting our budget, and now we're talking about saving a broken leg on a cat.
I will say, this amount keeps going up, but in my conversation with Paz, I think we were talking about $2,000 or $3,000 for the cat, not 15. But the point remains, and I agree with you, Councilman Larson. All right, let's put 30,000 there. Let's move on to our rec. Funding for our rec has varied over the years, but I think in general has remained over 120,000 with the exception of 1 year. The request was 135. I will say, though, Ms. Axthelm always says, we'll work with whatever you give us. Not that I'm making that as like a
Challenge?
a challenge. But we have funded 135 most recently in 2023, and then 2024 was 127, 2025 was 127. The average is 114,000. I guess because we're close to the end, do we want to put in 115 and then just kind of keep
I'm
going
good
and
with 150.
adjust as we go?
Let's see where we're at.
Okay. Next up would be the chamber. Chamber, there's a lot of variety in money to the chamber. 2023 was the most that we've done recently with 30,000, 16,000 for 2024, 15,000 for 2025. The request this time was for 44,000. Average there is 11,000. Could average that to 12 or 10. 10's probably a fair number, just because
10's
that's
probably
kind
a
of
fair
close to
number,
where almost
yeah.
everybody
Number
is.
on that.
We could put 10 there for now. We'll keep talking. Riverton Help Center.
Your Honor,
Yes, sir.
I do think you have someone from the audience who would like to address you.
I don't think so. Come on up.
I haven't even talked and you're already taking it down.
Well, and just understand, we're trying to put this down to figure out an average and then kind of see where we can adjust up or down for each of these.
I agree. I just want to thank you. Just for clarification, I like to say that, it's not really for the chamber, it's for the visitor center. We are providing a service to the city by operating a visitor center. It's not about the chamber. We have that combined for various reasons. We will take and work with, as Mary says, what you give us. It's very difficult to sit here and look at everybody that needs services and then compare that to a visitor center and helping tourists, and which helps businesses, but on and on and on. It's like apples and oranges, and it's hard to even look at. So all I'm going to say is thank you for whatever you can give us. I appreciate that.
Thank you. And thank you for your regular reports that you do without any pay.
I'm sorry I missed last week,
I wasn't going to say.
but I was recovering from my AC/DC concert.
You said AC, and I was thinking ACL, and maybe an injury. No, AC/DC concert.
She had a sore neck from, yeah.
Headbanging? I would like pictures, if you have them, of, okay, I'll look. That sounds good. Thank you.
Your Honor, again, I think the chamber performs a service that if we didn't have them, the city would have to do in some form or another. And again, if we hired one staff, it would cost us 5 times what we're talking about here. So again, I think the chamber does a good job, and I'm not saying we should give them $100,000, but I think we should give them a reasonable amount to help us promote the city and the economic development that brings income and sales tax revenue to the city and supplies business people the ability to make donations to all these other organizations that we're not going to fund tonight, so.
Okay. Good point. All right. And I guess in terms of organizations that have made a lot of changes and really come a long way, Chamber is there. Appreciate your guidance. All right, next up would be Riverton Help Center. This one has not been funded in the past. First time I think they've asked for funding. $5,000 was the request. Everybody, I think, the majority of individuals had proposed some form of funding for them, the average of which comes up to $1,000. I guess just so we can kind of get to a total and see where we're at and adjust from there.
And I guess, I think we put them with the rest of the organizations that are very similar to what they do and not show any funding for them.
I would agree with Councilman Bailey on that.
Well, you two would, because you both put 0 in your.
Well, no, it's not that. I think they're a good organization, but I think in light of fairness, because we did not, or were not able to fund the other ones, I don't think that it would be right to fund one and not the others. I think that they provide a great service as well, and I just think that there's other avenues that, unfortunately, some of these organizations are going to have to seek out.
Or we could fund all of them $1,000.
Well, there you go, but let's get to the end and see how much money we got.
Yeah, I'm not against that either. I think if we have some additional, we could maybe split that up a little and help them out as much as that allows.
All right. Well, for right now, let's put the average of 1,000, just because that's what we've been doing with some of the other ones here. And then let's see where we're at the end, and then cuss and discuss from there. Wind River Prosperity, that one we just had 3 that recommended funding. I think that's kind of the difference, I would say, between the Help Center and kind of where we've been discussing. That one, I would just say if we've only got 3, not even a majority of those who are recommending funding, maybe we would put them at a 0, at least for our working list right here.
Yep.
And then the average for WRTA, which this is way past Mr. Nichols' bedtime. Request was $86,000. I just have to tease him because he's also our FCAG director, and he signed up for it. The request was for $86,000. We had a couple that had suggested funding to the tune of $80,000. And then had a few that had suggested less. This one is one that.
Your Honor.
Yes. Let me guess. You have.
Let me guess. This was the hidden cell, and I apologize. That number should have been 43,000 for me.
Okay, that definitely changes the average there. Oh, it's not 430,000. Let me change my number here.
Okay.
All right, that would put the average there at 45. If we were to fund them as they've requested, that would put, if we were to do the average there at 45,000, that would put our total at 249,000. Would you agree with me on that number, Mr. Butterfield?
Sorry, say that one more time. What did you?
Change that to 45.
If you did that 45, by the way, Councilman Carr, I am absolutely just teasing because, like I said, we suffered from this last year or the year before. What I have on mine that I wrote down, we had as a working number Eagles Hope 20,000. Then we had 3,000 for injury prevention, just going with the average there. Juvenile justice, we put at 20. Pause was at 30. RREC was at 115. Riverton Chamber and Visitor Center was at 10. Riverton Help Center was at 1,000. And the volunteer firemen were at 5,000. That's the only thing we've agreed on tonight. And WRTA FCAG was at 45,000. So I had a total of 249. Is that where we're at? Okay. So if we kept it 249, and this is something that Mr. Bailey and I have already discussed, that means with the budget at 240, we'd have to find 9,000. I say we, I mean staff. Sorry. Or we could make some adjustments. Some of them that could be eligible for downward adjustments would probably be juvenile justice services, and the only reason I say that is because that's above the average. Other ones that would be eligible for downward adjustments would be the Riverton Help Center, because that one is at the average, but nevertheless, in terms of consistency, as we discussed, might make sense to do that as a 0. We're pretty well across the board on WRTA. I mean, in terms of, we've got a pretty wide spread, but nevertheless, that's right at the average. So do we have any proposals? Do we just kind of say, hey, that's 9,000, staff work with it? Or do we say, what do we want to do?
Your Honor, I'd like to see us get juvenile justice to their 35. I think of all the things that we're funding, I think it probably has one of the biggest impacts to the community overall. And I'd hate to see Lander beat us. Other than
It's that competitive nature, isn't it? She said that, and it really did stir something up inside me, too. I'm not gonna lie.
yeah.
And I was born there. I mean, I have nothing against Lander, but.
I don't think we knew that when you got elected, but, sorry.
It's in my brochures.
Would have changed some things.
I can prove it's in there.
Yeah, but it was so small to be read.
Is it just as big a type as anything else? I'll bring it next week for you.
But that puts us even.
Your Honor,
Yes, sir.
Uh-oh, here it comes.
we do have another option that I can think of. I know we are extremely conservative right now on our revenue projections. I truly believe that an increase of a small amount, especially on the parimutuel vetting revenues, would probably not be a stretch if we, that's another option that we can think about, because when I think about juvenile justice, yes, I would like to see them fully funded. However, no one or very few are at 100%, but just another option to think about. We don't necessarily have to reduce cost centers versus maybe increasing a bit or being a hair less conservative on revenue projection.
I can
That's
tell
all.
you right now, Councilman Carr, and I'm not trying to argue with you, because traditionally I can tell you that Ms. Harris is very conservative on revenue projections. I will tell you, she has, and she's already bristled.
Did you just gave her a heart attack.
I can see it on TV.
Yeah. Yeah, if we could get a nice zoom in on, no, just kidding.
Just kidding.
I think she has gone as liberal as she feels comfortable with this budget. Part of being able to right size and figure out the budget was saying, one of the ways we always make sure that we have a balanced budget is that we have a very conservative estimate for all of our projections for revenue. We increased I think the projections for example, the parimutuel betting. I think just about as much as we were comfortable based on the past and where it could go in the future. I will let you speak for yourself, Ms. Harris, but I've had this conversation with Mr. Butterfield weeks ago.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to defer to Mr. Butterfield to respond to that.
That sounds good. She had to do that because otherwise she was going to come through the TV screen after you, Councilman Carr.
Your Honor, as it relates to our revenue projections, we try to be realistic. And what we're doing is we're taking information that we have now and projecting it forward a year. It's like driving a car forward but looking out the rear window and knowing when to turn. And so that's what we do to the best of our ability, and we take data that we have. Right now, in fiscal year '25, we had budgeted to receive $60,000, and we have well overperformed that projection. At the time of the report I have in my hand of May 8th, we had received to date $127,880. So the 120 projection was one that we felt comfortable with as staff without really being able to predict the behavior of our community and how much they would utilize the one pari-mutuel site that we have, the Derby Club. So I think that 120 matches what the current performance is. To put it in perspective, fiscal year '24 only brought in $64,000. But I think that was a partial year of operating for the Derby Club.
How about in general, Mr. Butterfield? Not just pari-mutuel. I appreciate your answer, and I think we got it.
Okay.
I'm not trying to rush you.
No, Your Honor, you're fine. As far as sales tax, we talked about that. We had projected that this current fiscal year at $2,450,000. We're projecting it in next year's upcoming budget at $2.6 million. To date, or as of the 8th, we had received $2,409,572, and we can anticipate receiving 2 more payments. And so it's very likely we'll hit that 2.6 million, probably a little bit more this fiscal year. And so we felt that increasing that from 2.45 to 2.6 was realistic. Maybe more aggressive than we have in previous years as far as projections. There is a way for us as staff to take your direction and find within our operating expenses some more cuts. It will be challenging because we've already cut several $100,000 out of the operating budgets, but we can go to work for you. We can also look at our revenue projections. The other suggestion that you could explore is transferring unobligated cash to cover that. Now, keep in mind, in this budget, you are transferring already, when it relates to general fund operations. So in addition to the support that we talked about from the direct distribution or supplemental funding, which for operations is $673,223 from the direct distribution allocation, we will need $16,127 from unobligated cash outside of that reserved 18.5% to ensure you have a balanced budget. It's possible for us to increase that amount, but know you're drawing on a resource that is a one-time resource that does deplete and not replenish.
In other words, if we wanted to look at this for guidance for what to do in future years, we'd have to do it again, or we'd have to figure out a different source.
Well, that means next year we'd have to spend less because we can't keep robbing the piggy bank or there won't be any piggy bank left.
Right.
So,
Your Honor, I would, if I may, sorry. I would suggest working within our means of what's already been the suggested amount, which means that we reduce what we give out to some of those. Maybe reducing, as much as I hate to, our recreation by 15,000 and dropping pause back down to 20,000. That generates $25,000, which would allow us to meet
that'd be
the
where we need-
35,000 and will put us where we need to be without I don't think we need to be pulling from unobligated funds any further. I think we need to work within our means.
Okay, just as a general, I guess, guidance from the council, does that sound like what we want to do? Work within the 240? I know could have been a question we asked at the beginning, but it kind of makes sense to ask it at the end because we need to see where we're at.
You know, and I think if we have a great year and we go over a little bit, we'll have some extra funds to do some of these things.
Maybe that would
We,
be something.
we can always
consider.
spend more, it's really hard to spend less.
It was a unique situation last year where we had funding that we were going to put towards one group that then did not need the funding, and we put it
Right.
towards another one.
Yeah.
And I would say that is something that we could explore and say, hey, we could open this up for further funding for people if they find themselves in a jam or whatever in terms of some of these organizations or whatever. It's worth talking and thinking about. Okay, so in other words, we feel comfortable with keeping at 240. I guess let's just go through each line item then. So we have 20,000 for Eagles Hope transitions. We feel comfortable at that. Yay, nay?
Yay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Again, not voting, but just some general idea from the council, because this is actually going to be what's on the budget later. Injury prevention, we have at 3,000. Any objection to that? No?
No.
Okay. Juvenile justice, we have at 20. The discussion is to put that up to 35,000. If we were to put.
Can we split the difference and go 30?
We could.
My frustration there is that we have other funding sources for that, but we're tight, and if one gets a cut, all get a cut.
I hear you. Okay. I guess part of the 35 was just, that's what had been brought up. If we were to put that at 30, just for discussion's sake right now. Pause, have it 30. Your proposal, Councilwoman Johnson, was 20 there.
Correct.
Already we're below the average there. I guess for discussion's sake, you put that at 20. And then that puts me,
25.
yeah, that puts me at 249 on my spreadsheet right now. I guess removing the Riverton Help Center would put us at 248. So then we're still short 8. If we were to do what you were suggesting, Councilwoman Johnson, and we could find that 8,000 with our rec to get us to 240.
Your Honor, can we confirm numbers briefly?
Yes, yeah, I'm just throwing this out real fast. So Eagles Hope, I have at 20. I'm just trying to take the feedback and put it in to see what we have, right? 3,000 for IPR, 30,000 for juvenile justice, 20,000 for pause, 107,000 for our rec, really testing out Ms. Axthelm's ability to work within what she said she can do. 10,000 for Riverton Chamber, and 5,000 for Riverton Volunteer Firemen, 45,000 for WRTA. That puts me at 240. This is just kind of trying to put together a lot of different feedback.
Your Honor.
Yes, sir?
And I definitely don't mean to make any enemies, but I do question 10 for the Chamber of Commerce. I understand their benefit and the Visitor Center, but that is a private organization with membership fees. And that's where my issue there lies. I'm a member twice over. So again, I get it and I want to fund, but is that really, it just seems like we're tapping the barrel twice.
Okay. Any other
That's it.
discussion about the chamber? I mean, and I do think in terms of the discussion from Ms. Roden Olson, probably would be just about more properly putting that at the visitor center. We are talking about this in terms of having Colin there and available, and I will say, I mean, just in terms of as I look at the numbers, and I'm just looking at this in terms of what everybody had put, I think it's pretty close to what, I mean, the average is a pretty good average there. But if anybody else on the council, if we feel comfortable taking some away from the chamber to put it into another area, or I'm willing to hear anything.
If I may.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm comfortable leaving that at 10. I think that they provide a service for Riverton. They promote local business. And I think that accounts for something. And I would like to see, them at least get compensated for the advertisements that they do for the city of Riverton and the promotions. And on a side note, Cindy has worked incredibly hard to reinvigorate the chamber. And I think that she's done an exceptional job. And I think that we ought to honor that.
Well, and I think that's a very good point. There are some communities that don't provide any funding to the chamber. There are some that provide more. I think the 10,000 is pretty in line with other communities. But I hear what you're saying when I'm sitting there and comparing visitor center versus our rec, right? If we were to say, this is gonna make it so our rec is gonna have to really tighten and not have as many programs, not have as many things available, it's a difficult balance.
It is.
Especially because this is hitting our rec pretty hard in terms of where they've traditionally operated and we're their main funding source. Any other thoughts? Again, this is something that can be finalized in the budget, so this isn't something that we have to say, this is what we're going to do. We could get to the budget passage and say we want to adjust it. The biggest thing right now, I guess the question for staff is, do we want to say 240? I feel like the council has answered that with yes. From there, even on the day of passing the budget, theoretically, we could say we want to adjust that. So, not that I'm trying to make you have to do the book again or anything, but it is really one page in the book. So.
I think we're at a good point right now. If any of us come up with any heartburn in the next few weeks, we can tweak it a smidge, but
Okay.
This is the absolute worst meeting of the year.
I hate it
And
every year.
it is very challenging. and-
Which you can see by the empty seats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it'd be easier if they just turned the cameras off and nobody came, but then we could blame it on somebody else, see?
Well, but I do think, I'll be honest, I feel fairly comfortable with where we're at. I mean, considering that we are a body of multiple individuals that have to reach some sort of consensus in the end.
Yeah.
I feel comfortable with where we're at. I do think that it was well said in terms of being able to have more funding for juvenile justice. I think that, I don't want to say this, but there's been a neighboring community that has had a lot of issues with juvenile crimes. And thank God, and I say that very literally, thank God that we have what we have in the community in terms of the parents, the children, whatever it is, such that we have our issues, but not as bad as they could be.
But-
And I think juvenile
For
justice
for the
is part
amount
of
of
that.
money that we're gonna spend on that, the return on investment is huge.
And I actually really appreciate that most of the people here talking tonight, a lot of this is benefiting children.
No, it is. Yes, exactly.
And I think our children are at the forefront of people's minds. We're talking about a rec center and however in the world that will get funded. I mean, when we can't even barely balance our
Yeah,
budget.
we're having to cut buying cop cars.
Yeah. All right. Well, if nobody has any real heartburn with it as the way that we've done it right now, at the very least with the total, and then we can do some tweaking down the road, then I would say let's let it sit.
Yep.
I'm good.
It would just find another 50 grand laying around somewhere. It'd be really handy, but.
What's another question?
Thank you, everybody who attended. Thank you, council members. Thank you, staff. Thank you for all you do, those who have stuck around till the very end. And Mary, I hope that if nothing else can be conveyed to you today, that we appreciate you and feel like you're doing great work. It's tough. But I feel like you do great work. I appreciated the chance to be able to recognize you with the Boys and Girls Club. I wish I had been there for the flash mob. That would have been a lot of fun. Okay, I would entertain a motion to adjourn the council work session.
So moved.
Second.
Councilman Larson, I was waiting for Councilman Bailey to say that. I even started writing a B. You started breathing in. That's why you're laughing at me here.
Yeah.
Councilwoman Johnson with the second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes. We are adjourned at 9:55 PM. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Welcome to the Riverton City Council.
Yeah,
I agree
exactly.
with Mr. Bailey.
Welcome to the